Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us today and showing the movie with us. We love your work. You've been in the festival many times, and you come and watch a lot of movies as well. So it's really great to have you for your latest work, O Canada. Do you want to maybe start by talking about what attracted you to the material? I mean, you obviously adapted Russell Banks before, and we've talked about it many times. And at what point you knew there was a book that was going to be the next movie?
It really became a case of Russell getting sick. I had written a script about a nurse in Puerto Rico, a kind of an erotic thriller, and I was thinking of making that. And every summer I would go up and stay with Russell. And I called him up and said, you know, what's a good week for you? And he said, you know, not this summer. And it wasn't long before I figured out he was in chemo. And, you know, he was trying to put a good face on it, but there is no good face on it. And I knew he had written a book about dying. He called it Foregone. He called it my Ivan Illich. And it was about the degradations and the depredations of the dying process. So I thought, well, I should read that book because he had sent it to me and I hadn't read it. And I read it and I said, well, this is the movie I've got to make. And I've been having some health problems myself, having them the same ones today, a lot of bronchial problems. And I said, well, you know, if you're going to make a film about dying, you better hurry up. And so I got in touch with Russell and you know, got the rights from him. And he said, but please, when you do it, go by the title I wanted. I wanted to call it O Canada. But Richard Ford, who's also an upstate New York author, had a book coming out in the same time quarter called Canada. So you would have Richard Ford Canada, Russell Banks Home Canada, and no, that's no good in a bookstore. And so Richard had first place in the product position, and so Russell had to change it to Foregone. But he was very happy that we were able to change it back. In France, it is called O Canada. And that's why there's an H in the title, because that's the Canadian national anthem in French is with an H.
It's also a different sort of reunion with Richard Gere, because you've obviously worked with Richard some years ago, and bringing him in this sort of like character that could be it's such a personal film. And you have so much empathy and a question about him as a character, and working with Richard in that role at this stage of his life. I was wondering if you wanted to, could you have imagined the film without him?
Oh yeah, well, any number of actors could play this. It's a fast.
Richard is not here to hear that.
No, he knew it. It's a fastball down the center of the plate. And, you know, if you're any good as an actor, you can't hit that out of the park. You can't hit anything. And so I was trying to think, you know, how can I get some buzz to this casting? Because you're going to have a lower budget, and you're not going to have a big name. You're not going to get... I did talk to De Niro about it, but of course, the budget was a problem. And the same thing you would have with Dustin Hoffman or Warren Beatty, so I'm thinking about who really needs this, and who would put some spin on the ball. And I know Anthony Hopkins has played old, and Jonathan Pryce has played old, and Tommy Lee Jones has played old, but Richard's never played old. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. You know, he's 75 now. He's easier to make look 60 than he is to look 80. And I said, that just might really attract him. And he might be, this is a role, and people will be interested, in the dying, desiccated gigolo.
Well, I'm really glad you got Richard Gere for, I guess, little money playing an old man dying. That was an amazing proposition for him. He could not turn it down.
Yeah, no, I just said what I was going to say.
Then you brought Uma Thurman, Michael Imperioli, and Jacob Elordi after casting Richard?
Yeah, I finished the script about 2 weeks after Russell died, so he never got to read it. And I went to Richard immediately, and then it's a question of putting the pieces together. Elordi was a bit of a surprise to me because I'm not that up on that age group. And so his name was brought up. I did a Zoom with him. And said, wow, he's the guy I would have cast 40 years ago in American Gigolo. Okay. There's a height problem. He's 6'5", but other than that, no.
Well, it's a good height for him. Huh?
Yeah. And yeah, I think when I asked him about it, he said he had just done Priscilla. I said, no, don't do that to me again. Because I think that actress was like 4'11", 4'10". More than that, there was 10-inch difference between the two. Boxes and ditches and everything.
So after, I mean, we consider the 3 previous films that we've shown you, and you came with Master Gardener most recently. That was something that was really important to you to make this film for Russell, but also for you as a filmmaker. Yeah,
well, I've off and on over the years made a film about a certain character. Started with Taxi Driver. And I've come back to him maybe 5 or 6 times. And then did 3 in a row about him. Mm-hmm. So I knew I had to do something different. Critics like trilogies, but they don't like tetralogies. And then the same with Russell, and, adapting one of his books. Also, it was a mosaic pattern. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't made a mosaic film since Mishima. So it's one of those things where little bits and pieces, you put it together.
Did you like the puzzle part of like the pieces, like you mentioning Mishima, for this one as well? Was it shot out of, not chronologically? Did you work on the editing? Like, I'm curious about the process for.
I'm sorry, I'm missing that question.
So like, as a puzzle for Mishima, and like here.
Yeah, I thought you were asking me about Ethan Hawke. No.
We already did that.
Well, when, as a writer or film director, you come up with a complex structure, it's not because you want to make it more difficult, it's because you want to make it easier. So when Orson Welles comes up with Citizen Kane, he's just trying to make a complex story, an interface of lives, simpler. And so with Mishima, you use different color schemes, different formats. In this film, there's 4 formats. The Last Day, which is sort of Gordy Wills' deep color, and the trip from Virginia to Canadian border, which is more like, it's bleached out, more like Owen Reisman. And then there is the Ingmar Bergman section with that red-orange color for the sun. And then there's some random black and white plus box. So I think it basically works. Some critics, I read some comments saying unnecessarily complex, and I thought, no, that wasn't the goal at all. If I hadn't made it complex, it would have been unnecessarily obtuse. Mm-hmm. I was wondering what sort of direction you gave to your cinematographer. It's the first time you work together, and as you mentioned, it's
I mean, you say it's not complex, but the shooting and using different material for all these moments was...
He's here tonight. I'm going to have dinner with him. He used to be my assistant.
He got a big promotion.
Well, no, he has formed his own company, his own world, primarily in documentaries. He's one of these people that designs camera rigs and stuff. And so I knew he was very familiar behind the camera. I've been shooting a lot of footage. And it was just a matter of before someone gave him a bump and moved him from nonfiction into fiction. And beyond that, everything is sort of self-explanatory. Like all films, you watch a lot of films together.
Okay, so would you want to work with him again?
We're just talking about it. I've had this problem a couple of other times in my life where you get somebody cheap and they're young, and the movie works out, and then you can't afford them.
You need to sign a 10-film contract with everyone you're bringing to your level. I don't know. Ask Richard Gere to help. He can afford it. I mean, I know we're just talking about Canada, but I think you are thinking about when you work a lot. So you're writing something else already.
Well, I'm supposed to start pre-production in December, start shooting in January. This is an erotic thriller.
Is it ready for us for next year?
What?
Is it going to be ready for us for next year? Or
Well, if I shoot in January, that knocks it out for Cannes, and then all of a sudden you're looking at Venice.
That works for us.
Yeah. And
signing the contract as we speak.
Yeah. So it's the two brothers, and now I'm in the midst of starting another script, which is again about this character. Only now he's a professor of philosophy. But it's the same guy. It's a taxi driver. I've been writing quite a bit. Somebody asked me, a Hollywood reporter, what I wanted to be remembered for. And I said that's a hard question, because to be remembered for something, you have to believe in the future, which I don't actually believe in. So how can you be remembered for something you don't believe in? In that way, I don't think I have a future, and it's about 10 years. I don't think you people do. But if perchance, by God's grace, someone is still talking about films 100 years from now, I would like to be remembered as a guy who worked on spec. Worked on spec my whole life. So Taxi Driver was, 50 years ago, more, yeah. And I wrote 4 scripts on spec in the last 2 years. I'm writing one now, and I'm going to direct what I wrote on spec. I assume you know what that means. It simply means on speculation. I mean, you're writing a script that you aren't being paid to write. Nobody's optioned the book. Nobody's gotten you some money. So if you write the script that's no good and nobody wants to do it, you don't get anything. And that's why people don't like to write on spec.
Well, I think they like it if it's you. I wanted to ask you about, did you take any models for the characters as a documentarian? Anyone come to mind in terms of how you shaped the characters? Like from the book, it's quite different.
I used Errol Morris's camera. But Russell had written about a guy who wanted to be a novelist and then became a documentary filmmaker. Because it's an easier heft for him. Because there's a lot of autobiographical material. If you've read his autobiography, it's quite similar. So if presented with that same problem, I probably would have done just the opposite, which is a guy who wanted to be a filmmaker who ended up being a novelist. It just puts a little distance between you and the character.
It did make me laugh thinking about Errol.
What?
It made me laugh thinking about Errol Morris when I was watching the film. But we don't know, I mean, yeah, the camera was sort of a given.
Yeah, the screening in Toronto was the first. There was a lie we got a chuckle when Richard says, "I got a genie and a Gemini." Now both of those, they're in the film. They both belong to Adam McGoyan, and I borrowed them from Adam for the movie.
You're giving all the secrets. I do like that also because obviously the film is very touching. It's a tough subject to tackle, but you did manage to bring some, like breaking out of the tone just to, bring different atmosphere at certain time, and that was a really nice way to mix it up as well. You're not sure. Yes. Are you happy with the film?
Oh yeah, I know. I like the film, and
I like when you're happy about your own work.
well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen it in a while now. Most likely never see it again. So it's kind of strange. I have a hard time seeing the films I've done. I just don't do it. And I'm fond of saying that if you see your earlier work, this could be only two reactions, and they're both bad. One is you look at it, you say, God, I was talented. Whatever happened to my talent? And the other one, you look at it and you say, Jesus, I had no talent then, and I have no talent now. So why put yourself through that?
Well, I think...
But I'm sure there are directors. In fact, I've met them who think everything. I was sitting next to Bob Altman once at a dinner somewhere. I said to the person, Bob just gave me the hardest look. I was talking about films that worked and didn't work, and he's acting like every single one of his films is a masterpiece. And she was a friend of his, and she said, he thinks it is.
I appreciate the ability that you're bringing to the stage. It's a great film, and I think everyone in the audience really loved it, and it was really amazing to have you.